Welcome to this Prospect Fringe event in association with the BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. My name is John Bernstein. I'm an associate editor with Prospect magazine. To my far right, your far left, we have Dr. Mohammed Al-Ubadli, who is the founder and CEO of Patients Know Best. Next to Mohammed, we have Jeremy Taylor, who is Chief Executive of National Voices. Next to Jeremy, we have Joe Churchill, MP. On my left is Andy Kinnear, who is the chair of the BCS's Health and Care Group. And finally, we have Dr. Jenny Tennyson, who is CEO of the Open Data Institute. That's the panel. This is the question again. Who owns health data and how can it best be put to use? Andy.
I guess the question for me is not so much about who owns data or where it comes from and the sources and things like that. It's more about why aren't we exploiting the value that that data has got. So the way in which the data is being collected, stored, digitally or not, lots and lots of information in the health service still far too paper based. So there's a whole piece of work underway for us to digitise the way we collect health data. That's just a fundamental must-have. Until we get to, and I'm sure Mohammed will have words to say on this, but until we get to a place where the public truly own and have got the capability to own that data, where they can electronically access and sort of control consent and access to their information in the way that we do in other sectors of our lives, then we won't see the NHS and health services realise the value of that data.
Andy, thank you very much. So that's, in a sense, the start of your question. You say, it's not so much about who owns data, it's about why aren't we making best use of it? And then inevitably, you have to come back to ownership, don't you? You have to come back to this issue of ownership.
Exactly. There's a kind of cultural journey. I mean, we've been on it in so many, other sectors of our lives where we as members of the public, we as people, we as members of society are taking ownership and control of our data, and it changes the way in which that industry, whichever it might be, whether that's travel or banking or wherever it is, then interact with us. And I think health has yet to fully, make that journey, frankly.
Andy, for the moment, thank you very much. So who owns data, health data, and how can it be best put to use? Joe Churchill.
I have a long-term interest in how we look at data and how we use data to benefit people. And actually, for me, that's one of the things we miss in this whole discussion, is the value of data for patient outcomes. So just as we've heard, there's lots of pockets of it doing really well. And what we now need to do is seize the day, look at what Dame Fiona has suggested, and just take, in a very quiet, measured way, the instructions of clinicians, of researchers, but most importantly, patients. And government should then come to the table and respond in an appropriate way to deliver what's needed. And that, for me, would be the right way to go about it, to ensure that, actually, as my little badge says, data saves lives. And that's what I'd like data to do.
Joe, thank you for the moment. Mohammed.
You can afford, free of charge, to give everyone's data, a copy of everyone's data to everyone in the world instantly. That's what you can do with technology. So then you can sit down and ask, well, actually, who should have it, when, and under what purpose? We can all agree that the patient should be given a copy of everything that's done to them and everything that's about them. And I want to convince you that beyond that just being a moral and ethical thing, it's happening today, and some amazing benefits can happen. Our customers, who are across all of primary, secondary, tertiary and social care, so all health and care providers, send a copy of all their data into an account controlled by the patient. And the contract we sign with them says that the copy that they send is owned by the patient. And the obligation that we have is that the data we hold are encrypted, and only the patient and whoever the patient chooses can decrypt the data. We can't get to it. So we know that patients have said that 92% of them would voluntarily open up their record for research purposes if they had the data. We know this from our existing users. The only thing they were missing is, can I have the data and then I can give it to everyone? And then for those providers to get the benefits they need to get the data, reduce the costs, improve the quality, they just ask the patient, can I look inside your record? And of course the patient says yes. And then you have charities like Cancer Research UK, National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society who are consenting the patients on, will you open up your record so I can cure cancer more quickly? Will you let me look at the data so we can do that research? And of course, once the patients look at the data, they can understand their health, and they can also manage their health, which reduces the pressure on the healthcare system, as well as improving the outcomes. So I don't know who should own the data, but I do know that you should give a copy that the patient should own, and that lots of good things will happen once you open that up.
Mohammed, for the moment, thank you very much. I'm fascinated to hear Jeremy Taylor's view from National Voice.
It's not just that there is data about us because of things that people have done to us in a clinical setting. People increasingly want to create their own data and do. And I think one of the best examples of this is Patients Like Me, where people go online and share information with patients like them from all over the world and compare notes about their conditions and about their therapies and about their therapists, and create a bank of data which they're happy for other people to use. So that's a very, very different kind of ball game in all kinds of ways, very empowering. Shows what can happen when you have, a digital world and a social media world coming together. People are creating their own reality. They're not just waiting for the system to do things to them in a more high-tech way. They're creating their own reality with their data. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact it's not a one-way street. It's not just the system capturing data about us and whether we're allowed to have access to it. It's also about we increasingly can create our own reality and our own communities with our data, which I think is quite exciting.
At the ODI, our mission is to connect, equip and inspire people around the world to innovate with data. And one of the things that we have found is that the terminology we use about how people can access data is really important to get right and to be specific about. Otherwise we get into debates where we shouldn't be getting into debates. We should be thinking about what kind of reference data we need to have available for health purposes in order to link up different data sets more easily, to ensure consistency between data sets and to build these things into systems. Reference data, like I was saying, those lists of diseases, lists of drugs, or lists of hospitals or other practitioners that you might want to go to. That kind of data is easily made available for everybody to use, can be available for everyone to access, use and share, and we ought to be thinking about it more. Similarly, statistical data, aggregations to small areas of healthcare statistics can give us different kinds of insights. They can give us insight into healthcare trends, they can give us insights into the likelihoods of particular conditions being experienced that we can then use to compare and contrast with our own records. So we ought to be thinking more about what that open data is, not only being dragged into the personal health records debate.
I think we've all agreed that we need to change the public story around data and to get more trust within the public about how the NHS is using that data. I just like to ask whose responsibility is it to change that story? I think to an extent it's everyone's responsibility, but there is that danger that if it's everyone's job, no one does it.
I think the public trust question you touched on, I think it is a glib answer to say it's everybody's responsibility, but that is the truth. For me, the change will start to happen when media reporting starts to talk about people who came to harm because their information wasn't shared. So rather than the story being about an NHS failure and things like that, if they talk about the actual harm being as a result of the failure to share information, then I think that sort of flips it a little bit, and I think people then start to understand where they're getting into.
It's all our jobs. However pathetic that is, it is then up to us to make sure that we motivate. People are bored rigid. I'm like Mrs. Data, and I don't let anybody go before I've said, do you realise how important this is, that we start moving forward with it. I would like to see you as patient champions draw those patients out, garner the clinician, garner your charity and say, this is what we need. Because it's only that power, as Andy articulated, from what we're missing that will mean that people, the front of the Daily Mail, may one day hold for me that wonderful thing, oh, we can do this now, we trust it, it's transparent, it's accountable.
Year on year, 10-year periods, people archive data and it becomes in a format that nobody can actually use. I recognise that you've got 330 different databases or storage media, but has anybody considered that valuable data that's stuck in all those archives?
You know, as a data-obsessed person, I worry about archiving, but what I will say is, I don't know the exact number, but if you look at the last X number of years, we've generated more data than the entire previous history of mankind, and it's not a very large X. So the real amount of data is only just coming our way, it's interpreting it. But if you look at the Swedish government, which has for hundreds of years been maintaining records about citizens, whether it's healthcare or taxation or anything, there's a reason that the Swedish economy generates real research results from looking at that longitudinal whole population data. And so there's huge benefits from going back to those archives.
I get very frustrated when I go around hospitals monitoring clinical trials and having a look at the clinical trials about data, medical record sharing between clinicians. So that's one side of things. How can we open between trusts a lot more, between secondary, tertiary, primary, so sharing data between professionals?
The thing I am famous for, if you like, the one thing I've done, you know, that I'm sort of most proud of in my career, is to join together data in Bristol, in the city of Bristol, around a patient, around 1 million patients, frankly, using social care data, GP data, acute data, mental health, you name it, from all the different sources. And you can come to our city now, and there's 2,000 doctors there who are accessing a combined health record. Now, just to give you a scale of what we've achieved, right? So this is 5 years' worth of work to get to this point. This is 17 separate health and social care organisations, but it's about 19 clinical systems we're joining together at the moment. So this very often isn't a case of a lack of willingness or a lack of wanting to do it. It's just these things are, you know, blooming complicated and are built up at a kind of silo level over many, many years. So breaking down those barriers and creating ways to join it together is a huge job of work. We're on it, but it's going to take a while.
Please thank the panel.